Hey guys, welcome to Business Coder. Today we are going to discuss the actual differences between TypeScript and JavaScript, and should you actually start using a TypeScript in your project, and if you have already written a lot of JavaScript code, should you rewrite that into TypeScript? So let's just jump in. For the past about a year or so, all kind of project that I have done, I've just mainly written a TypeScript code, not a single line of JavaScript. Okay, let's probably a couple of lines of JavaScript just to test something. I'll get back to that within a second, which is the main point of this video actually. So the idea behind TypeScript is to bring type system similar that we have in Java or like in Go, Rust, etc. Other type-based programming languages into JavaScript, because there was a huge debates and a lot of issues regarding that JavaScript is not keeping the types, and every developer which is working on the same project can change the object type that defined by other developer in another function or component. So that was the main issues coming from JavaScript, and especially when React came up, there was a lot of issues what kind of properties this component should receive, and the React team did a great job like introducing a prop types, but that prop types actually just specifically dedicated to React components, but we have also a lot of business logic that is not contained inside the React, and we are writing tons of JavaScript. So the Microsoft team actually came up with that TypeScript, which is basically they wrote a new compiler. It compiles down to a plain JavaScript, and from their own words, like it is going to be optimized, way more optimized than you and I will write. I'm not sure if it's correct, but I've seen a lot of benchmarks that just could prove that. From the perspective of building a project, when you are working alone, you can think that, hey, okay, I don't really need a type system. I don't really need to add more complexity to my code base or write types. I just know what will receive my function. But I got a huge argument for that, because whenever you are typing some code or writing some function which is going to be used in another places, the huge difference comes when you actually need auto completion work on your VS Code or wherever code editor you are using. The TypeScript just makes so much easier for code editors to have auto completion in place and have that working way more correctly than you will do in a usual JavaScript case. So that's like, I will say for me, that's one of the biggest reasons why I love writing a TypeScript instead of JavaScript. But I agree, it adds up a lot of complexity. Of course, you have to define and write a lot of code, especially like defining interfaces or types that you usually don't need to write for plain JavaScript, and that saves you some time. But the argument there is that you will save actually a lot of time later on when you will start digging inside your code or trying to actually understand, for example, what this functionality is doing. And especially if someone joins you as a second developer, it just really pain to understand what kind of parameters this JavaScript function is going to receive, especially if it gets, for example, an object of options, which is a lot of libraries using for getting like constructor field. So with TypeScript, there is like strict definitions, like you will receive this kind of options. Each option should be a string, boolean, etc. And the amount of errors just going down dramatically because JavaScript itself don't have any type checking, but instead TypeScript designed in mind that it is going to check by default types and will catch an errors if you, for example, passed a boolean instead of a string, or you have object with certain structure and you haven't provided it, or you have, for example, a variable that couldn't be undefined but you passed as an undefined. So it is a lot of rules that restricting code that you are writing, but it is just saving you a lot of time later on. So just to come back to the point where why you actually need to write a plain JavaScript anymore. So the actual case that I've been using for some certain points is that whenever you need just experiment and understand if it's working properly, or do you have like enough resources to process a certain thing. Let's say you are running a for loop and you want to just understand, is this are you able at least to parse this CSV file, etc. So in that cases, of course, like using a TypeScript is not make sense actually, because you are getting some complexity with the TypeScript which is not giving you any benefits there. You just have to sit down, write a couple of lines of code, understand, let's say you are playing with some API and want to just get back a response with JSON format and just log that in. With TypeScript, you just have to define the response type and the request object properly, which is not make sense for that specific case. But other than that, like if you are building a real world project and you are thinking of launching that and having a support for a couple of years at least, you definitely have to choose a TypeScript right now, because there is a tons of libraries in NPM that even if library is not written in TypeScript, they have a TypeScript definition in place because the adoption of TypeScript is just growing insanely, and whenever someone wants to use even your NPM library in their TypeScript project, TypeScript will throw an error if there is no type definitions. So, and the user actually itself have to rewrite that definition in their project. So the point is that whenever you want to hack on something, or you are like in a hackathon, you have 1 day of time and you have to build some kind of a like weird API, you don't need TypeScript. It is just adds up a lot of complexity. But in other hand, if you are building a project and you want to use the latest JavaScript features, like everything you have in ES6 or ES7, TypeScript has it is built in, and it actually, you don't need Webpack. TypeScript compiler itself adds up that compilation process, and you have to use in certain points of TypeScript, because in most of the companies that I work with, they have pretty large teams with a lot of lines of JavaScript that they are transitioning into TypeScript slowly. One fact that hugely benefits using a TypeScript is that by default TypeScript could run a JavaScript code. So if you have already a JavaScript project and you're thinking to rewrite that to TypeScript, you can actually start by piece, which means that TypeScript usually will pick up your JavaScript file as usual. Of course, types will be everything any, but at least you can get your code running and you can just replace file by file. I actually did that about 2 years ago. I had like pretty average size project, about a couple of hundred files, and every time when I touched on one of the files, I changed something there. I just basically changed a file format into TS and started the types definition. It's actually not that hard. It just requires one time effort, and you'll just benefit that from later on, especially if you are working with a team. So I guess that's it for this episode. Stay tuned. Don't forget to subscribe. We are putting our videos regularly every week, and we all talking about here a full stack development and publishing in production paid apps, which one of them is coming up. So don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell icon.